Welcome to my YouTube channel at Sci-Fi Tales Pules. Please subscribe, like, and share to support my channel. Ethan Cole walked through the long hall of the palace with slow and careful steps. The floor was made of white stone that shone in the light of the tall glass. Windows, soldiers in silver armor stood on each side and did not move or speak. The air felt heavy and silent, as if the walls held their breath. He had been called by the Queen herself, and he did not know the reason. At the end of the hall, two golden doors opened on their own, and Ethan stepped into the throne room. The room was bright and wide, with tall pillars that reached the ceiling. The Queen sat on her throne wearing a crown with many blue gems. Her gown was white with gold threads that caught the light. She watched Ethan walk closer. Her eyes were calm but strong. Ethan stopped a few steps away and bowed. The Queen raised her hand and told him to stand. She spoke with a voice that was soft but carried across the room. She said there was a matter of great importance. She said it was about the safety of the Empire. She said a law from long ago had been found in the royal records, a law that named him by title as the one who must marry her sisters. The words fell like a stone in Ethan's mind. He looked at her and felt his heart beat faster. He wanted to ask why, but he kept silent. The Queen explained that the Empire was in danger. There were groups who wished to take her sisters as hostages to weaken the throne. She said that by the old law, if her sisters were married to a hero of the Empire, no one would dare to harm them. And she said that he had been chosen for this role. Ethan felt the weight of her words, thought of the wars he had fought and the peace he had helped win. He thought of the quiet life he hoped to live one day. But he also thought of the people who might suffer if he refused. The Queen told him that he would meet her sisters that evening, so they could see the man who might become part of their family. The Queen stood from her throne and walked down the steps. She was taller than he expected. Her gaze never left his face. She said that the sisters were each different and strong in their own way. She said that they had their own thoughts about this matter and that it would not be easy to win their trust. She told him to be ready for questions and tests of character. Ethan left the throne room with his mind full of thoughts. Servants in fine clothes led him to a chamber where he could rest. He looked out the window and saw the city spread out below. Towers rose high into the sky, and ships moved between them in smooth lines. The sun was bright over the horizon, and the airships glinted in the light as he waited. He wondered about the sisters. He wondered what they were like and how they would see him. He wondered if they wanted this marriage, or if they were as unsure as he was. He did not know if this was fate, or just the will of the Queen. But he knew that soon he would find out. The sound of soft footsteps came from the hall. The door opened, and a young woman stepped inside. She wore a simple gown of silver, and her hair was the color of chestnut. Her eyes were sharp, but not unkind. She said her name was Leora, and that she was the eldest sister. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. She told him that the Queen had spoken of him, and that she wanted to see if he was truly the man described in the stories. She said that she would decide for herself if he could be trusted. Ethan stood and faced her. He felt the start of a long and uncertain path. The air between them was still and heavy. Leora gave a small nod, as if she had made some first judgment. Then she turned and told him that the other sisters would come to meet him. Soon, Ethan stood there, knowing that this was only the beginning of what lay ahead. Ethan stood near the window of the guest chamber, as the light from the high sun filled the room. He could see the streets below, filled with people moving in the warm afternoon glow. The city seemed alive, yet he felt apart from it. His thoughts were still on the meeting with Leora. Her eyes had been sharp, and her tone had been calm, but he could tell she was already testing him. The door opened again, and another figure stepped inside. She was dressed in a dark blue uniform that looked like something worn by a fleet commander. Her dark hair was tied back, and her steps were quick and sure. She stopped a short distance from Ethan and looked straight at him. She said her name was Mara, and that she was the second sister. Her voice had a strength that matched the way she carried herself. She told him that she did not believe in easy trust. She wanted proof of skill and proof of courage. Mara asked him to walk with her, and they left the chamber together. They moved through the long corridors of the palace, passing tall windows that showed the open sky. Ships moved between the towers in steady paths. Mara spoke about her role in guarding the borders of the Empire. She spoke about the dangers that still lurked in far systems. She said that anyone who wished to stand beside her family must be ready to face such dangers without fear. Ethan listened without interrupting. When they reached a wide balcony, Mara stopped. She looked out at the horizon where the city met the sky. She told him that there was more to this marriage than the words of an old law. She said that each of the sisters carried the weight of the empire in a different way, and if he could not carry his share, then he should step aside now. Ethan met her gaze and gave a small nod. Mara did not smile, but she seemed to accept the answer for the moment after Mara left. Ethan returned to the chamber, but he had little time to rest. The third sister came soon after. She entered quietly, and her presence felt lighter yet warmer than the others. She wore a soft green gown, and her hair was golden. Her eyes were gentle and full of kindness. She told him her name was Celine, and that she was the youngest of the sisters. She said that she did not hold power in the court or command ships, but she carried the love of the people in her heart. She spent her days visiting the sick and helping the poor in the city. Celine asked Ethan to sit with her near the window. They looked out at the city together. She spoke of the hope she had for peace to last. She spoke of children in the streets who dreamed of a better life. She said that whoever joined their family must protect not only the throne but also the smallest and weakest among their people. Her words were simple, but they touched something deep within Ethan. He saw in her eyes a quiet strength that was different from the sharp mind of Leora or the bold will of Mara. As the sun began to set, the light in the room grew soft. The palace bells rang in the distance, marking the hour. A servant came to tell Ethan that the queen wished to see him again in the throne room. The sisters had spoken with her, and now she wished to hear from him. Ethan walked back through the halls. The shadows had grown longer, and the golden light of the chandeliers gave the corridors a warm glow. When he entered the throne room, the queen was waiting. She stood beside the throne, and the three sisters stood near her. Each sister looked at him with a different expression. Leora with careful judgment, Mara with steady resolve, Celine with gentle hope. The queen asked him to speak about what he had learned from meeting her sisters. Ethan stood before them and felt the weight of their eyes. He thought of the strength in Leora, the fire in Mara, and the compassion in Celine. He spoke of what he had seen and how each of them carried the empire in their own way. He said that he could not promise to be perfect, but he would not turn away from duty. The queen listened without a word, and when he finished, she gave a slow nod. The hall was silent for a moment. Then the queen told him that the days ahead would test him beyond what he had known. She said that soon a journey would begin, and its end would decide more than his own fate. The sisters stood still as the sound of the palace bells filled the air once more. Ethan knew that whatever came next would shape the rest of his life. Ethan rose early the next day as light from the twin suns poured into the chamber. The city below was already alive with sound and movement. The palace was quieter in the early hours, but the air felt tense. He had been told that the queen would speak to him again about a matter that could not be delayed. To guards in silver armor led him through the winding halls to a council room. This room was smaller than the throne hall, but still grand. A round table of dark wood stood at the center with maps of star systems. Spread across it, the queen stood at the far end with her three sisters beside her. She told him that the empire faced unrest in distant worlds. Far governors had grown restless, and some whispered of breaking from the throne. A treaty was to be signed on the far world of GalacticPrime to calm the rising tide of rebellion. The queen said that Ethan would escort the sisters to the treaty gathering. She warned that the path would be long and filled with dangers. She said that the safety of her sisters was his highest duty. Ethan felt the weight of the task, yet he gave a nod of acceptance. Leora stepped forward and handed him a small silver seal. She said it would grant him passage through any gate in the empire. Mara moved closer and placed a data crystal on the table. She said it contained all known threats along the route. Celine brought a folded piece of white cloth and placed it in his hands. She said it belonged to her and that it would remind him of home during dark times. They departed the palace that same day. A sleek royal ship waited at the landing platform. Its silver hull shone in the bright light. Guards and crew stood ready as the sisters boarded. Ethan followed them inside. The interior was lined with fine wood panels and soft light. The hum of the engines filled the air as the ship rose into the sky from the observation deck. Ethan watched the city grow smaller. Ships moved in steady lines through the air before the royal vessel broke free into open space. Stars spread across the black like endless grains of light. The journey had begun. The first days were calm. The sisters stayed in their quarters most of the time. Leora studied reports and sent messages to the court. Mara spent hours in the training hall sparring with the guards. Celine walked through the ship, speaking with the crew and bringing small gifts from the palace. Ethan moved between them, speaking little but watching everything. On the fifth day, trouble found them. A warning came from the helm that another vessel was approaching at high speed. It had no royal mark, and its course was direct. The captain ordered shields up, and weapons ready. Mara appeared on the deck in her uniform. Her eyes were sharp as she took command beside the crew. The unknown vessel drew closer until it was within range. Then it opened fire. The royal ship shook under the impact. Ethan took the nearest defense station and returned fire. His aim struck the vessel, forcing it to pull back. But it did not flee. It circled them like a predator, searching for weakness. The battle lasted for long minutes. The sisters held their ground. Leora fed tactical data to the captain. Mara directed the gunners. Celine stayed with the injured in the medical bay. When the enemy finally turned and vanished into the dark, the ship was damaged but still able to fly. Ethan walked the decks after the fight. He saw the faces of the crew, tired but proud. He found Celine in the medical bay. Her gown was stained, but her hands were steady as she comforted a wounded guard. She looked at Ethan and gave a small nod as if to say that they had passed the first test. That night, the ship moved on through quiet space. But Ethan knew it would not last. The road to Asterion Prime was still long, and the dangers ahead had only begun to reveal themselves. He stood at the window of his quarters looking at the stars, knowing each one could hide a new challenge waiting to test him and the sisters he had sworn to protect. The royal ship sailed through the dark between the stars for many days without trouble. The repairs from the last battle were holding well, and the crew worked with quiet focus. Ethan kept watch at all hours, moving from the bridge to the lower decks. He could feel the pressure of the task growing heavier as they drew closer to Asterion Prime. One morning, the captain called Ethan to the bridge. The view ahead showed a wide field of floating rock and ice. It stretched for thousands of miles, and the only safe path was narrow and full of hidden dangers. The captain said they had no choice but to pass through, if they wished to reach their destination on time. Ethan ordered the crew to slow their speed and keep shields at full power. The ship slid into the field, and the sound of rocks scraping the shields echoed through the halls. The crew moved with tense speed, calling out distances and hazards. Mara stood beside Ethan, watching the readings. Leora studied the maps and gave directions to avoid the worst clusters of debris. Celine stayed near the medical station, ready for any harm that might come. Halfway through the field, the sensors picked up movement. A group of small raider ships emerged from behind the larger rocks. Their hulls were dark and hard to see in the shadows. They darted toward the royal ship with sudden speed. The captain raised the alarm, and the crew took their positions. The raiders struck fast-firing weapons at the shields. The ship shook under each hit. Ethan took the forward station and returned fire. One raider was destroyed in a bright flash, but others moved in close, trying to attach to the hull. Mara led a team to the lower decks to stop any boarding attempts. Leora sent coded signals to confuse the attackers. Celine kept the injured calm as the fight raged. After a long, intense battle, the last of the raiders turned and fled. The royal ship drifted in the silence of the field. While the crew made quick repairs, Ethan walked the decks, checking on each section. He found Mara with her team, their armor scorched, but their eyes fierce. She told him they had stopped 2 boarders before they could reach the upper decks. Leora met him near the bridge with a faint smile, saying the false signals had bought them just enough time. Celine came to him in the corridor with news that all the injured would recover. When the ship cleared the field, the crew let out a quiet sigh of relief. The stars opened up ahead, and the path to Asterion Prime was once again clear. Ethan stood on the observation deck with the 3 sisters beside him. None of them spoke for a long time. They all knew that the journey had tested them more than before, and they had passed together. Days later, the ship entered the Asterion system. The view of the planet was breathtaking. It hung in the dark like a blue jewel surrounded by silver clouds. The capital city could be seen from orbit, with towers that shone in the sun. The ship descended toward the royal landing platform, where guards in bright armor waited in neat lines. The queen herself was not present, but her envoys welcomed Ethan and the sisters. They spoke of the treaty gathering and the leaders who had already arrived. They warned that not all were friendly and that the talks would be tense. Ethan kept his eyes on the crowd, scanning for any sign of danger. He could feel the tension in the air like a storm waiting to break that evening. They were taken to the great hall of the Palace of Asterion. The room was filled with banners from many worlds and the sound of quiet voices speaking in guarded tones. Leaders stood in small groups, watching one another with careful eyes. The sisters moved among them with grace. Leora spoke with key figures about the future of trade. Mara met with military leaders. To discuss border security, Celine moved quietly through the hall, speaking with those who seemed alone and overlooked. Ethan stayed close enough to watch them all. He could sense that someone in the room did not wish for peace to succeed. The air felt heavy with unspoken plans. He knew that the final and greatest test was still ahead, and that he would have to be ready to protect the sisters at any cost. The great hall of Asterion was filled with light from tall windows. The banners of many worlds moved gently in the air from high vents. The sound of voices rose and fell as leaders spoke in small groups. The Queen of the Empire had not yet arrived, but her sisters stood with pride among the gathered rulers. Ethan stayed close, watching each face for signs of trouble. He noticed a man in dark robes standing near one of the pillars. His eyes moved often toward Leora, Mara, and Celine. Ethan walked slowly in his direction, keeping his steps quiet. The man turned away. Before Ethan reached him and slipped through a side door, Ethan followed without speaking. The narrow hall beyond was empty except for the sound of boots on stone. The man moved quickly through the hall and into a wide chamber with a high ceiling. There a group of armed guards waited. They wore no royal colors, and their weapons were hidden beneath long cloaks. Ethan stepped into the room, and the man in dark robes smiled without warmth. He gave a signal, and the guards moved forward. Ethan drew his weapon, and the fight began. The sound of metal clashing rang through the chamber. Ethan blocked and struck with trained skill, moving to keep the doorway clear behind him. He heard footsteps, and saw Mara arrive with 2 loyal guards. She joined the fight without hesitation. Her strikes were fast and her eyes fierce. Leora came next, holding a small device in her hand. She pressed it, and the sound of alarm bells filled the palace. Celine appeared moments later, with more guards from the hall. Together they pushed the attackers back. The men in cloaks tried to flee, but the royal guards blocked their path. When the fight was over, the attackers were taken away under heavy guard. The man in dark robes was among them. His face was pale, and his eyes filled with defeat. Leora stepped forward and told Ethan that the man was a spy sent to break the treaty by striking at the royal family. She said his plan had been to harm one of the sisters and place the blame on a rival world. The queen entered soon after she listened. As her sisters told her what had happened, her gaze turned to Ethan, and she gave a single nod of respect. The danger had passed, but the weight of the day still hung in the air. The leaders of the worlds had seen the attempt, and now looked at the royal family with renewed trust. That evening the treaty was signed in the Great Hall. The rulers stood side by side as the agreement was sealed with the royal seal of the Empire. The air was filled with a sense of calm and the promise of peace. The sisters stood together with Ethan at their side, and the hall glowed in the golden light of the setting sun. After the ceremony, the queen called Ethan to a private garden at the back of the palace. The garden was quiet, with the sound of water flowing in stone fountains. The air was cool, and the sky above was filled with the first stars of the night. The queen told Ethan that the law still stood, and that he had the right to marry her sisters if he wished. She said the choice was his alone. Ethan thought of Leora with her sharp mind and steady will. He thought of Mara with her fearless heart and strength. He thought of Celine with her gentle kindness and hope for the people. He thought of the journey they had shared, the dangers they had faced, and the trust they had built. He spoke with a steady voice, telling the queen that he would not make such a choice for power or duty alone. He said that he would remain close to the royal family as a protector and friend until the day came when love itself made the choice clear. The queen accepted his words with grace, and the sisters each gave a small smile. The stars shone brighter above the garden as Ethan stood with the queen and her sisters. The Empire was safe for now, and peace had been won. But Ethan knew that his path was now bound to theirs, and that the bond they had formed would shape the days to come. Thank you for watching and being part of our community.